through that he talks about. Oh, hi.
Hi, I'm getting ready to record for you.
Oh,
Hey.
cool. Oh, also, I
Hi.
haven't said hi to everybody else.
Oh
Hi.
yeah. Say hi. You
Hi.
can talk, ladies.
Hello.
The
Hi.
gang's all here.
I'm Jack.
Um,
Nice to
uh,
meet you.
we are here with a word with Kelly Scott Reed. We've got the whole gang here. We're here with Jack Moody. Jack is a writer, and his debut novel, Crooked Smile, came out back March 14th. Came out back March 14th. He's the former staff writer for the Lit magazine podcast Brick Moon Fiction. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're very happy to have you. I follow you a lot on the Twitter because I'm ancient. Um, and I've always found what you do very interesting. Your writing. Could you tell us about a time when you realized that language had power?
Yeah, sure. This the it I'm probably going to be talking about this album for so long. The Kendrick Lamar album that just came out, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. That was just the first thing I thought of when you asked me that question.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, it affected me like a lot more deeply than I thought it would. It kind of stayed with me because of just how personally I connected to it. And it's just kind of on a lot of different levels, it affected me because it's kind of him talking through his own therapy sessions across this whole album and his kind of journey of kind of unearthing past trauma and how that informed how he moves around the world today as an adult. And I was having a conversation with my wife about it like just before I got on this meeting, um, about how it kind of made me the way that especially the way that he uses language, with his voice and the eloquence that he has. It made me kind of think about, just given the climate of the world and and this country, with I don't even know how much I want to like talk about it, but what just happened today,
mm-hmm.
um it just kind of hit me like really hard today. um that it's and stop me if I'm going off on a tangent, but it's we've gotten, I should say, I've gotten kind of desensitized to all these things, horrible things that happen, and you kind of just subconsciously like remove yourself from it.
Mm-hmm.
And because you feel like there's only so much you can do as a person, and you feel kind of impotent in a way. And it made me kind of reflect on the album and how he was kind of talking about that, but how, especially for him, like through the lens of the Black experience, but how there's all these things that are beyond his control, and how through his use of language specifically, like he kind of decided that there's only so much that you can do as one person, and where you can start and what you can do is change the trajectory of your own life and your own journey, and kind of do that inward work to kind of be the influence that you kind of hope to see on a larger scale in the world. And that kind of gave me comfort in this context, that it's like there's only so much you can do, but what you can do is work on yourself and the way you move in the world to affect some kind of positive change in that context. And that's the most recent example of that specifically. But yeah, that was a really great example of the power of language, because it really made me reflect on my own life like deeply. It was a beautiful album.
Well, I am glad you mentioned that. My son, um, he loves Kendrick Lamar, but he also loves MF Doom, who passed away
Yeah,
over the
RIP.
pandemic. There's such poetry um, that we're getting through music. I'm a huge fan of lyrics and putting poetry to melody. And he's always telling me, he goes, these themes that are in the music that he's listening to, like MF Doom, which we joke about. I'm always getting in arguments with him about it because he says I'm so out of touch because I don't listen to a ton. Not that I don't listen to a lot, but he just wants me to read every lyric and how it's put together.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a design to it.
Yeah.
So not just the words themselves, but the design really can speak to you on a very different level. I'm really glad you brought that up, and today as well, because it has been, it's almost numbing,
Yeah.
like when you've been hit over and over and over again, and you're not hit person, like this did not happen. Buffalo is very close to us, so that just happened.
Yeah.
um it's so constant that it's easier to just tune it out
Yeah.
because your body's just so used to taking it. And again, like you said, just get that awakening of what can I do to constitute positive change, or to initiate positive change, is a very good way to look at it, because all you can do is your surrounding world and making a change and difference that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I've been kind of hanging on to that idea through this because it really did. It just kind of welled up in me. I've been working on this and I was like writing and I was like, why do I feel so yucky?
Mm-hmm.
And then it just kind of started bubbling up until I was like kind of almost tearing up and it's like, wow, this really affects you on a subconscious level. Like no matter how much you consciously tune it out, it's there just being part of the the human condition. It gets to you. So that was a beautiful use of language that helped me in this specific instance.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, I'm glad I got to
Um,
talk about it.
Me too. I almost, it's like, feels like the questions I'm going to ask you are just like, oh, well, who
That's
cares?
okay.
But, I do thank you for sharing that. It was really great. What do you think the elements of good writing, or writing that's effective or means something to you, is? So you're talking about this song coming to you in this album and meaning something. What are the elements of good writing?
Well, I mean, it's obviously pretty subjective with any art form. Um, for me, because I saw the question, I was kind of thinking about it. Um, for me, it's kind of about how well can you convey emotions, I think, because there are kind of two ways to approach writing from my perspective, and one is writing something that when someone is done reading it they kind of walk away with something to think about. Maybe it's a question or just some kind of idea, and another is they walk away with a certain feeling that the story gave them. And me personally, I don't think I'm nearly smart enough to write things that really make people like walk away with some big question, like I've hit them with some uh you know ancient philosophical musings or whatever, but I think anyone that is familiar with the human experience can inject that emotion into a story that someone can then relate to. So it's just about clearly conveying the emotion you're trying to convey, which kind of comes down to just cutting the fat, I guess, to a certain point. It can.
So let's talk a bit for a second about Crooked Smile, because you're talking about conveying feeling. Could you tell us a little bit about the book? And I know some about it, but I want to hear from you. How did you feel you conveyed feeling and get empathy and for the character, and to kind of fully flesh out? Is it Henry? I can't remember if that's
Yeah, Henry Gallagher.
okay. Henry Gallagher.
Mhm.
Talk to us about that a little bit.
Sure. um well, it's uh, it's autobiographical. um Legally I should say it's fiction, it's a novel.
Mm-hmm.
But it's based very much on my experiences, and most of it was written as it was happening. because each chapter I just named each chapter after the month and year that these events happened during. And most of the book was written within days or weeks of the the actual events. And so a lot of the time it was really just before I even understood that I wanted to turn this into a large body of work. Um, it was just processing in like the rawest way I could. Like, I mean, therapy. And I think because of that, because it was so fresh for most of the book, that emotion, it was hard not to come through in the writing because I didn't have a lot of time to kind of sit back and look at it from a more separated standpoint. Like I was very much in the throes of these things that I was writing about. And I think, and I've gotten not too much. I mean, the overwhelming majority of the feedback I've gotten has been super positive, which I really appreciate. But I have heard that it's like a little uh too morose, too emotional. Um, and I understand that, uh, but it was by design, whether consciously or not, because it was uh vivid descriptions of what I was really feeling, and that's kind of my whole thing, is that I don't want to tone things down for the reader. I don't want to kind of whitewash or celebrate these things. So in that way, it's very much rooted in kind of dirty realism in a way that it's just like, this is what happened and you're going to write about it, warts and all.
Mm-hmm.
um, because the more honest you can be, the better chance you have of connecting with the audience. People are smart, and they can pick up on when someone isn't being genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my whole thing, was like, I'm going to lay it all out, and like, this is what I was thinking, this is what I was feeling, and you can choose to accept that or not. And I think the empathy for the character comes from um it came from a place of like me really trying to see the good in myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I really wanted to find empathy for myself. Like I had to believe that there was something good in me,
Mm-hmm.
despite all these things that I was doing and acting upon and things that were happening around me. I needed to see some kind of light in myself to be able to get to a better place. And so I think that comes through in the writing as well. That's why people are able to relate to the character and empathize with the character. And I'm glad that I did it then, that I
Mm-hmm.
seem to have done it at least a little bit of justice, that it came through in the writing.
Absolutely. Thank you. Now, when you wrote that, did it, with writing, we can become drained sometimes. Like it's a
Yeah.
cathartic process, but it's almost like a flushing out, and you become like
Mhm.
weak afterwards.
Yeah.
Did you get energized by your writing this, or did it exhaust you? A little bit of both?
It was horribly exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
It was like painful. It sucked. And I didn't really see that until I was done with it. And now that I'm working on this new book, which is just kind of, just storytelling, just stories that I was able to see like how much fun I'm having now because of how not fun it was to write that book. Um, it was really draining. It was really exhausted. It kind of felt like this purge. Um, and so in that way, it was a nice, it was a release, but yeah, it took the energy out of me. It was not an enjoyable experience at the surface. Deep down, there were things that came from it that made my life a lot better and enriched my view of the world as a result of it. But yeah, like any like therapy, at the surface, when you're speaking about these things, it's incredibly difficult. But what you can gain from it, if you allow yourself to, can be nourishing. And it kind of had the same effect on me. It took a while for me to see the silver lining around the reason why it was so exhausting.
Yeah, yeah. Now, um, when you're writing and you're being, what you wrote was so it was you, it was raw, it was on the edge. When you read it again and you like go through, I know I overread my things. I'm the most views on my
Thank
own stuff.
Yeah. Oh yeah, me too. I think that's almost everybody.
Trust
I hope
me,
so.
I'm the only one reading it. If when you go back and you read it, do you feel still connected to that person, or has that become someone that you used to know? I know that I look back on my life as it's gone on, in 30 years ago, where I was, I don't even know that person anymore. It's like a totally foreign person, but you have in writing who you were,
Yeah.
which is, or who you are, but who you were. When you look back, does it feel familiar or very foreign to you?
That's a really good question. Um, that's a really good question. I've only read it now that it's been done. I read it once when the book came out. And it was I there there was like the core of myself that was still there. It was me before I kind of did all that work to dig out all that stuff, you know. I saw that that still core of who I am and my personality is in there, but it's just buried deep beneath these layers of these things that I hadn't dealt with at the time. And now I feel like a little lighter now than I was then.
Mm-hmm.
I was maybe a little weighed down there, but the core of who I was then is still who I am now, and I was able to kind of see that pretty clearly when I read the book over, um, which I think is a good thing. It means I was able to uh, put myself into the character well enough that I recognized myself. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like a caricature of myself, which I kind of worry about sometimes when it's autobiographical work. Um, but yeah, it's still there. It's just it was a rougher version of myself.
Now, what got you started to be a writer in the first place? Like, did it start early? Did you just discover it?
um, it did start really early. I always, whenever people ask me this kind of question, I say, well, I like kind of started when I was 21. And when I was 19, I read On the Road. And that's kind of what got me into like seeing that I could turn my own life experiences into a work of art and make some kind of purpose out of my own experiences. But really, um, I don't remember a lot of my childhood, but I do remember, and I think this speaks to how formative of a thing it was for me when I was young. But I was like 5 or 6, and I wrote these little stories. I remember the first story I ever wrote. It was about an old like lumberjack or something in the woods that finds a little baby dragon, and he brings the baby dragon into his cabin and like takes care of it. And it was like a 7-page story, and I thought it was a masterpiece. And when I was young, I used to kind of just do that a lot on my free time. I'd write little stories, just kind of like fun fantasy stories. And I remember my mom would I'd on all my days off for like over summer break, I remember writing this big like on loose leaf this 40-page like fantasy thing, and she like made cover art for it from all these pictures off Google Images or whatever it was, and like laminated it and put it together so I'd have a little book of it. And I used to do that a lot when I was little. And and I had a fifth grade teacher, Mrs. Oh, I probably shouldn't say her name. But she we had a whole course on, I'm actually really glad I get to talk about this. I haven't really talked about this publicly. But we had this like poetry course that she was really passionate about when I was in fifth grade. And she read some of the stuff I wrote, and she kind of pushed me. She was like, "Oh, like this is good. Like you can put words on paper and it sounds nice." And I was like, "Thank you." And she kind of pushed me to pursue that a little bit, and she was kind of that first influence for me as like a creative to kind of explore that side of myself and kind of celebrated that side of me, and it was really sweet, and I still remember her very much. It kind of it it validated a side of me that I didn't pay as much attention to. So I think that's kind of how I got started. And then, stuff happens as it tends to as I got older, and I kind of fell off from it and didn't pick it back up until I got a little older. But I still remember that as kind of like the little nugget of where it comes from. And I'm glad I remember it.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Oh my God, I love that. Now, do you have any that just warms the cockles of my heart? That was awesome. I I don't remember. I had a typewriter. For me, it was more of the act of writing, the
Yeah.
physical act of pressing the keys that I liked. I was a little kid. I put my typewriter. I remember the first poem I wrote was The Lily Pond, probably
Mhm.
misspelled with everything because you'd have to use whiteout back in the day. So I'd get my typewriter and I the lily pond and back, and I loved it. It was all in a line, but just one off because I
Uh,
wasn't doing it right. It was the first poem I wrote, and I don't know why I wrote it. I have no idea. So I'm glad you have that nice story. For me, it's just I got to play with a
no, that's cute.
typewriter.
That's cool. I like that. Something about like the physical act of writing. I know what you mean. Yeah,
That like
that's cool.
putting the words down.
Yeah,
So
for
do you have
sure.
any literary heroes that you uh kind of tap into sometimes when you're writing or you need a minute to to reconnect with yourself? Do you have any writers that you go to?
Um, it kind of depends on what I'm trying to write. Um, I have kind of different influences of people that I kind of look up to, that their writing kind of directed me into the styles that I like to apply to my work. Um, I have the early influences that like any 18-year-old kid who has like a substance abuse problem had, like Bukowski and Jack Kerouac and things like
Bukowski.
that. Yeah, of course. I was a very big Bukowski fan. Um, Not so much anymore. I still appreciate it for what it is, but now, honestly, I think my favorite writer, and I always try to bring this up in like interviews and stuff because I don't think he gets enough attention. Scott McClanahan is probably my favorite writer. I love him. He's amazing. He's come out with a few books, but his book, the Sarah book, um, like changed how I saw writing. It was so like raw and emotional, but had this kind of padding of humor to it, and the prose style was really unique. And I had just never really read something like that before, and it kind of had that effect without being like experimental. It still felt very much like kind of a page turner kind of style, but it was just very much uniquely his voice. And yeah, I love his writing. And uh, I might butcher his name, Ted Chiang, I believe. He wrote the book Exhalation and the Story of Your Life. Um, and like he's like, have you seen the movie? What do they call it? Arrival, about the
Mm,
aliens and the
yes.
linguist.
Mhm.
That's based on like a little novella that he wrote. It's just like
Oh.
very like heady, very like heavy on the science fiction. Um, that's just like so fascinating and creative. I love his work, and he kind of dives into like almost spiritual concepts and religious concepts, but through the lens of uh kind of uh, through science, through a scientific lens, and kind of, and
Mhm.
obviously puts a lot of research into the way that he tells stories, and I think it's really cool. um Ray Bradbury too. I think The Illustrated Man is like one of my favorite short story collections ever. um And I'm always kind of, yeah, my influences are always changing. There's always something that I can pick up from somebody. It's why I like to read a lot of different stuff. Because I like to write a lot of different stuff too. Um, and the more people you kind of pick up on, the better informed you can get about how you want your own voice to sound,
Mhm.
without being kind of pigeonholing yourself into one style because you become obsessed with this one author or whatever. Um, yeah, so
So
off the top of my
what
head,
are you writing like right now? What are you working on? What are some of the things that you got in the
oh,
pipeline?
well, I'm working on it's going to be my third book. It's a collection of short stories. And I think like 7 or 8 of the stories are already out there. They're like through my link tree in different places. There's some that went up on like Maudlin House and Expat Press and A Thin Slice of Anxiety, um, which may not be the best marketing procedure because by the time the book comes out, all the stories are already out there for free. But I'm just so excited about them. I just want people to read them. It's I've been kind of I was like so exhausted after writing like a really dark kind of transgressive like autobiographical book that I just wanted to like just nerd out and just write like fun like sci-fi fantasy like surrealism. So there's a lot of surreal elements in the stories, and what I'm working on right now that'll be a part of the book um is it's turning into a novella now that's called The Monotony of Everlasting. That's this story about this immortal person that doesn't know why he's immortal, and it takes place from the first crusades all the way till the death of the sun and the end of the universe from the perspective of this person. And it's been so fun to write, and it's kind of just grown and grown and grown into like this whole story, and I've just had so much fun with it. It makes me feel like a kid again.
Oh,
uh
that's so cool. And I love
yeah.
the title. I
Oh, thank you.
love the title.
Yeah, I'm really
That's
excited about it. Yeah, it's fun.
concept is great. You know, it's like for me, that's hell. Like to exist
That's kind of,
forever is
yeah.
hell.
Yeah, that's a big plot point from his perspective. And I got the idea because there's this person in history um that I hadn't heard of. There was like this YouTube video essay that I saw about this guy named the Count of Saint Germain. I might be butchering that because I think it's a French name. Um, who was around in the 1700s and and basically told everybody that he was immortal and that he had found out how to make the sorcerer's stone, and he was an alchemist that could turn lead to gold, and he was like 400 years old, and he was friends with, I think it was like King Louis the 15th in France, and he had all these famous friends, and he was very like talkative, open, uh like socialite that would never eat in front of people, and he'd only like drink out of this mystery flask. And there's all these weird like folklore stories about him and that he's still alive. And I just, from that, I just thought it was so fascinating that I just like got that concept of like an immortal person, and like there's so much you can do with that one concept. So I kind of, that's how this one started, and it's almost done. I'm really excited.
That's great. Oh my God. Well, what are your like the socials? What are your handles? I'm going to put it in the document itself when we publish this, but
Mhm.
just to get it out there for people just to jot down and
Sure. Yeah. I think I have a Facebook. I don't know. But I definitely have an Instagram and a Twitter, and it's just Jack underscore is underscore Moody at, and that's me on Instagram and Twitter. And through there, I have a link tree that has a link to both of my books, my first book, Dancing on Broken Records, and my novel Crooked Smile, and a link to like all the short stories that have come out lately that'll be in this third book if anybody wants to read them. That's my plug.
yes. Awesome. Thank you so much. Oh my God, it's been great speaking with you.
Thank
Thank you so much
you.
for the awesome conversation. You
Oh,
really,
good.
I just
Yeah,
could
I had
talk
a
to you
lot of
all night.
fun. Oh, thank you. That was really fun. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. We will, let me just change my view here so everybody can, you can see everybody. I don't know if I change their view. I don't know technology. Thank you so much for
You're
coming
welcome.
on. They're dying because I'm an idiot. All right. Thank you so much,
Got it.
Jack. And we'll see you soon. We hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, I
Again,
hope so
this
too.
was
Thank
great.
You,
you.
Jack. It was so nice to
Bye.
meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Bye.
Bye.